And we're back.
It's us again, the Horror Guys. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Brian.
And we're
this
here
is
to talk
episode 52.
52.
One
Episode 52.
solid, unbroken year. No weeks off. No sick days.
Slaving away, week after week.
Didn't even fall
For you
victim to serial
fine
killers or mad
viewers and
slashers.
listeners.
Wow.
Yeah. It was close, though. We had to fight them off many times.
Yeah.
We saw
You should see the freezer in our basement.
We saw good movies and we saw bad movies. And here we are again.
And that was just this week.
Yeah. That's true.
Well, this week, we saw some good movies and some bad movies.
What did we see?
Started out with the 1943 Universal mystery thriller, The Mad Ghoul. The Oliver Reed-heavy Hammer psychological thriller, Paranoiac, from 20 years later. The quirky Nekromantik from 1987. And the French Livid from 2011. Quirky. I saw your reaction last week. I know how that one's going to go.
Classic of horror.
There's a whole lot to talk about. So here we go.
So first we saw the Mad Ghoul, eh?
We did.
1943. He wasn't very mad. He wasn't very angry. He was the other kind of mad.
The boring ghoul.
He was the mad scientist kind of mad.
Yeah. 1943 Universal film directed by James Hogan. Written by Brenda Weisberg and Paul Gangling. Stars Turhan Bey, Evelyn Ankers, David Bruce, George Zuko, and Robert Armstrong, an hour and 6 minutes. How about that top billing at Turhan Bey?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did he get like 3 words in and 2 minutes of screen time?
About that. Maybe 6 words.
Yeah, I wonder what the top billing was
6
for
words
that, because
12
he
minutes.
was just really a very minor character.
Very supporting, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy ending for him at the end, but, you know.
About the only one, but
yeah,
that's just weird. I guess 1943, he had done some of the Mummy movies.
I guess that was enough.
I don't think the Phantom of the Opera had come out yet.
Compared to everybody else in the movie.
Yeah,
he was number one.
Well, George Zuko, he was the old man in the Mummy, all those Mummy movies. You know, the old man who you sent out the Fez people.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was in all of those, even though he died in the first one. And the other names don't really mean much to me. I don't know who those other people are. We haven't seen much of them.
Therefore, top billing.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Yeah, it was okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of meh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the professor explains that the ancient Mayans in class, the professor explains that the ancient Mayans used to know a lot about poison gas, and they had some very specific uses for their poison gas. They didn't use it to kill people, but instead it turned them into mindless slaves. He's going to spend the summer break investigating this gas. It seems that the Mayans cut out the hearts of sacrifices to bring people back from death caused by this gas. My teachers were never that interesting.
And coincidentally, he takes on this student.
Yeah. Dr. Morris then asks his student, Ted, to be his assistant during the summer months. Ted is all in for that, but he and the professor first have to stop and listen to Ted's fiancée Isabel sing on the radio. Priorities.
Yeah. Yeah.
The two of them go into the lab and look at a dead monkey. It's not really dead.
It's not dead.
It's just under the effect of the Mayan gas that the professor has reproduced.
It's like magic.
The gas will eventually kill the monkey, but the professor intends to reverse the poison using a chemical derived from the hearts of the dead. And they do it, and they revive the monkey.
And in order to do this, you need some dead, don't you?
You got to kill something. Kill a monkey, yeah.
Or dig somebody up or something. No, spoilers.
Did they kill a monkey? How did they bring the monkey back?
They used another monkey's heart.
It was a monkey, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That evening, Ted and Isabel come by to Dr. Morris's house for a visit. Dr. Morris realizes that Isabel has fallen out of love with Ted, and the old doctor quickly tries to move in on her, and he asks if he can help her dump him. Hi there, young lady who's half my age. You've just broken up with your boyfriend. You like old men?
You can call me Daddy if you want.
Professor. The next morning, Ted says he's going to ask Isabel to marry him later in the afternoon. The doctor, on the other hand, boils up some poison gas and tricks Ted into walking into a room full of it. Ted doesn't die, but he becomes completely suggestible and he looks like a zombie.
It's a dirty trick to play on him.
Yeah. Morris then tells Ted to forget all about Isabel. Which he says it's going to make you suggestible, and the Mayans used it to make slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Does Ted forget about Isabel?
No.
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 No. No.
No.
Morris and Ted head over to the cemetery, and then they dig up a body to cut out the heart. The doctor does something with the heart. We never really see what.
Mm-mm.
And sure enough, the next morning,
Blender.
Ted is normal again.
Blender. Smoothie. Heart smoothie.
Everything is looking good for the doctor until the test monkey suddenly keels over dead.
Oopsie.
Oops.
Complications.
The antidote is only temporary. Ted doesn't realize his time is counting down as he doesn't know what happened to the monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Isabel gets word that Ted is coming to town for a visit, and her new boyfriend, Eric, doesn't like the idea.
Eric is not her new boyfriend. He's been her accompanist for quite some time.
Yeah,
and
but
they have
he's
fallen in love.
kind of moving in on things, yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, Morris's commands to the zombie didn't quite take, since Ted is still infatuated with her. Just as Ted asks Isabel to marry him, he relapses into his zombie state.
Oops.
Stress seems to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He and Morris make a quick trip to this town cemetery and knock out the caretaker. They steal his heart instead
Fresher.
of digging up a fresh corpse.
Fresh this time.
Why dig when you can have fresh?
That's right.
Isabel and Morris have dinner, and she explains that she's involved with Eric now. That night, Ted becomes the Mad Ghoul again. Morris turns Ted against Eric and orders Ted to kill him. Isabel interrupts things, and Morris and Ted drive away and find another cemetery-raised heart. Meanwhile, the reporter who has been working on the case figures out that for every murder, Isabel has been singing in the same town.
Coincidence? I think not.
I think not.
Also, grave robbing going on.
Yeah.
Something is afoot.
Every town that she goes to.
Mm-hmm.
He works it out with the local undertaker to pretend to be a fresh corpse in the next town where Isabel's going to be playing. Sure enough, Ted and Morris come in to claim the heart, and the reporter sees them. And it doesn't work out so well for the reporter.
No.
Sometimes you can be too smart for your own good.
Mm-hmm.
Now the police get involved, and they're on to the Isabel connection and to the ghoul as well.
Yeah, leaving a trail a mile wide.
Yeah. Well, the reporter told everybody what he thought and what he... Yeah, and he was right.
It's pretty obvious.
They question Isabel, and they think Eric is the murderer. She suspects Ted. Ted realizes that his nightmares are real. He now remembers everything. He's kind of dead. He didn't know about it before. It wasn't really him.
Mm-hmm. No,
Ted
he does.
Ted now mixes up some of the poison gas and wrecks the lab before changing into the ghoul again. Morris comes in and orders Ted to kill Eric and then himself. Ted walks off with a gun, and then Morris inhales the gas, freaks out, and runs off.
Oops.
Isabel and Eric are on stage performing when Ted walks up on stage with a gun. The police, who are sitting right there in the audience, shoot him. Morris then heads to the cemetery and starts digging for a heart, but dies before he can find one. The end.
Tragic ending for, kind of a bummer of an ending. Except for Eric and Isabel.
Well, Ted didn't do anything wrong. He was kind of the victim here.
Yeah, and he ends up dying.
Did not work out well for him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well.
The only zombie Universal horror film.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the only one that even comes close to a zombie film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bad, but it was very predictable.
Mm-hmm.
Ted was part zombie, part Jekyll and Hyde as he turned back and forth. And overall, this one's just sort of mediocre. It's not really a bad film, just sort of bland.
Sort of bland and mediocre.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Speaking of bland and mediocre, we also watched Paranoiac from 1963.
I wouldn't exactly call it bland or mediocre.
Okay, you liked it?
Strangely, yes.
The filming and the lighting and stuff kind of remind me of old Dark Shadows serials. It's black and white, it's British, and it just kind of had that look to it.
It's like Hitchcock light.
Yeah,
It was
very much. Yeah.
It was very Hitchcocky. But yeah, I overall I gotta say I liked it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, Hitchcocky.
It was middle of the road. I'd give it a 5 or a 6.
I mean, he was no Hitchcock, but it had elements. It smelled of Hitchcock.
If it had Hitchcock's name on it, I wouldn't debate it. Yeah, it did look like something of his.
If it had his name on it, I would think, this isn't his best work.
Okay,
but it was overall good. Yeah.
Hammer film, 1963, directed by Freddie Francis. Which I forget the trivia I read. I don't think that was his real name. It was really, I think it was really somebody else. One of the regular Hammer people who didn't want his name on this.
But they kind of distanced themselves from the Hammer.
Yeah.
Written
by Jimmy Sangster.
Not a typical Hammer. Yeah.
Stars Jeanette Scott, Oliver Reed, and Sheila Burnell. Can't even say it. Sheila Burrell. 1 hour, 20 minutes. And there's a link on Amazon to watch this one. And you liked it?
Yeah.
I said, meh. We open in a cemetery where we see the tomb of John and Mary Ashby and their son Anthony. There's a memorial service inside the church. Turns out it's been 11 years since their deaths. We hear how John and Mary died in a plane crash, and then Anthony later killed himself out of grief. The other son, Simon, is still alive. Simon is playing the organ at the service when a strange man walks in. Simon's sister, Eleanor, faints at the sight of him. Dun, dun, dun.
Who could it be?
It's a mysterious stranger.
Turns
out she saw Tony, who isn't really as dead as everyone expected.
Or is he?
He jumped over the cliff, and they never found a body, but all just assumed he smashed himself on the rocks and was washed away.
And there was a note left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Simon and Aunt Harriet argue, mostly because he isn't upset about the ceremony. He's very much over his parents' death, but he drinks way too much. Simon thinks his sister is insane and would like to see her locked up.
And
could be they're all right.
And Simon, he was supposed to be just turning 21 and getting his inheritance. And
yes.
He wasn't 21. And she was supposed to be their little sister, and she wasn't a teenager.
It's another movie with a bunch of mid-20-somethings playing teenagers.
Yeah.
Well,
he was 20.
Crazy.
He was 20, okay. But, he was really 25 at the time. Yeah.
Well, part of it is that they all walk around wearing these old-fashioned suits, and they all look like old men, even if they are in their 20s.
Yeah, that helps, yeah.
Eleanor sees Tony outside her window again. The family later finds her outside, wandering in the garden. She certainly does look insane. Later, we see that Eleanor's nurse and Simon have a thing going on. Simon screams and rants when they tell him he's out of brandy. Cosset, the executor of the estate, cuts off his alcohol allowance, but that's going to end in 3 weeks when Simon comes into his inheritance.
Oliver Reed.
There's a lot of people yelling at Simon to behave himself, but hey, he's Oliver Reed. Of course he's going to drink a lot.
Oliver Reed at his most Oliver Reediness.
Yeah, he's just getting started at this point. Eleanor freaks out and jumps off a cliff too, but Tony rescues her and brings her home. The nurse and butler see him, but they don't know him. The butler thinks it might be Tony from having seen the old pictures, but no one believes him. Simon nearly runs him over on the street, and he does recognize his own brother. Aunt Harriet knows who he pretends to be, but she doesn't believe it. He says he never jumped off that cliff. He just left a note and disappeared. He accuses Aunt Harriet of doing something to Eleanor to make her crazy, but she denies it. Both Simon and Harriet are skeptical of the whole thing, but Eleanor is all in for having her brother back. Were you fooled at this point?
I was wondering.
Yeah, it wasn't clear at this stage.
I wasn't totally convinced at that point.
Yeah. There seems to be a lot that Tony's unsure about, and it does look like he's an imposter.
Well, and there were times when it seemed like, oh, that's obvious, because he didn't recognize the lawyer's name at first.
Yeah, and he didn't know which bedroom was his, and so forth.
But then he goes into his old bedroom, and there's a locked wardrobe, and he immediately reached for the key.
Like he'd done it before.
Like he knew where the key was, right up above on the top. So, it was like, is he or isn't he? It really did make you wonder.
Well, you always see in movies, they reach up, and they get in the car and they reach up in the visor and there's a key in the visor.
Mm-hmm.
Question for everybody out there.
He reached right up where it was, though. He didn't feel along the top.
How many of you have a key in your visor in your car?
Is it really a thing?
Is it really a thing? Do people really do that? Or under the mat or somewhere really
I
obvious.
knew somebody who did that. He had a key under the mat. I thought he was an idiot for doing that.
How obvious?
Yeah. He did. Yeah. He had an extra key under the doormat, literally. What? Or maybe just, thought it's such a predictable thing that nobody would look there. I don't know. But he did.
Well, the family lawyer, Cossett, comes by with a list of questions and gives Tony a test. Turns out he's not really Tony. He's in league with Cossett's son, Keith, to defraud the family and get a share of the inheritance.
Well, he passed the test, though.
He
Passed
did,
the lawyer
yeah.
test.
He got lucky.
Which further, was like, oh, must be him then. But then there's a scene immediately following that. Oh, it's not him.
Yeah, it's really not.
But then I thought, wouldn't it be an interesting twist if it did turn out to be the actual Tony?
Pretending to be a fake.
Pretending to be fake.
That'd be interesting, yeah.
That would have been interesting.
Double cross.
Yeah.
Well, he's in league with Cossett's son, Keith, to defraud the family and get a share of the inheritance. Keith even suggested some of the questions on his father's test. That's how he managed to cheat.
Mm-hmm.
Tony doesn't like what he's doing, because he especially likes Eleanor.
Yeah, he's kind of a good guy, actually.
Yeah.
Despite being a con guy.
Simon tells Tony that he doesn't believe he's for real, but Tony doesn't care what he thinks. Late that night, Tony hears singing coming from somewhere. He follows it outside, where he's attacked by someone in a mask. He gets cut, but it's not serious. Okay, who's this crazy person in the mask?
Mm-hmm.
Simon then overhears Eleanor and Tony making picnic plans, and he does something to the engine of the car they plan to take.
The brakes.
They go
Papers
to the
with the
picnic
brakes.
without any problems, but when Eleanor tries to turn the car around afterwards, the brakes fail, and she almost drives off the cliff.
The car does, and
Yeah.
that's a pretty good scene.
Mhm.
Pretty tense, and
Yeah, Tony pulls her off the car before the car goes over,
Mhm.
and Simon is shocked when he sees Eleanor and Tony returning in a taxi. He gives one of those classic
Foiled.
fist-biting moments. Oh, they're not dead yet.
Yeah.
That night, Tony hears the music outside again. They see Simon playing the organ with a little boy singing next to him. The boy wears a mask, just like the one the mask that attacked Tony.
Yeah, that's kind of weird and creepy. And
Yeah.
what
The singing
heck?
turns out to be coming from a record, and we see that Simon is every bit as crazy as his sister.
Mm-hmm.
Then the masked person comes out and almost attacks Eleanor, but Tony then pulls the mask off, unveiling Scooby-Doo.
Merv Gifford. No, wrong movie.
It's Aunt Harriet,
Ah,
who explains that she was trying to keep people from realizing that Simon was insane.
trying to keep the lid on his madness, basically. By
Yep.
kind of playing along and helping him.
Yeah, he feels responsible for Tony's death, and he's never been quite right since then. Tony realizes that it must have been Simon who messed with their brakes, and the nurse overhears the whole conversation.
And then I was thinking, the nurse might be the puppet master. That thought didn't last long.
No.
Yeah.
Tony and Eleanor kiss, and he forgets himself that he's supposed to be her brother, and he gets a little too romantic, which makes her freak out.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out she's in love with him, and she doesn't really care if it's incest. He admits that he's an imposter. The nurse then tells Simon she's leaving him, as she knows what he did to the brakes, and he kills her and dumps her in the pond. No more nurse.
And she is no longer a suspect.
No.
No.
Tony then goes to see Keith and tells him to be careful. He thinks he knows where the real Tony is. He tells Eleanor to pack her things, as they'll be running away later tonight. Tony then breaks into the organ house and looks around. Aunt Harriet finds him there and orders him to leave. He then finds the real Tony, dead behind the pipe organ.
And I figured that out before they actually revealed. Yeah. I know where Tony is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why Simon and Aunt Harriet were so sure that Tony wasn't really Tony.
Mm-hmm.
Simon admits to killing the real Tony and then trying to kill Eleanor and the imposter Tony. Simon knocks him out and goes berserk. Aunt Harriet comes in and sends Simon to bed. She sets the building on fire with both the live and the dead Tonys inside. Eleanor comes in and unties the live one, while Simon rushes back inside to rescue the dead one. But he is trapped inside and dies. The end.
And the ending seemed a little bit abrupt and a little bit rushed, maybe.
He runs in, grabs the dead body, and the roof falls in on him. The end.
Well, not just the very end, but the last bit.
Oh,
seemed a bit rushed, but yeah.
Yeah, well, once you know all the secrets, once you know what happened, much more is there to do?
Get it out of the way.
Yeah, it was a quick ending. Yeah. Well, it wasn't clear until about halfway through what was actually going on, and even then it wasn't clear who knew what.
Mm-hmm.
Still, it all does resolve itself in the end, more or less.
Who knows what, why?
Yeah, we don't know when everything happened.
Mm-hmm.
It's not clear whether the fake Tony inherited the money or not at the end, and we don't know if there was any justice for Aunt Harriet. Aunt Harriet lives, but I guess she must not have been in the will because the money went to her nephew Simon originally. So she's like...
But if Simon's dead, then where would it go?
Probably Eleanor.
It seems like it.
Oh, technically Tony, if he was the real Tony.
But, well, it depends on if Eleanor and the girl were going to go along. And
Harriet...
Because the lawyer had already certified that was Tony.
And Harriet was propping up Simon, pretending he wasn't insane, because he got the money and she was living there off of his dime.
Yes.
Simon's dead now, so she might just say, hey, look, it's really Tony, and just go along with it.
Keep living on the dime.
Yeah, all three of them just kind of keep the fraud up.
Yeah. Right.
But we don't know this. This is speculation.
Yeah.
We don't know if there was any justice for Aunt Harriet. It's creepy. It's mysterious. If you like Oliver Reed, he's at his reediest here. Still, the story isn't much. There's an old house and a family secret, and we've all seen this story or one just like it a dozen times by now. It's well done, but it's just not a particularly original story. But you liked it.
I liked it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm. Did we see anything short?
We did.
We saw one called The Monster.
Not a very catchy title.
But
The Monster.
A very catchy little piece. I liked it.
From 2019. It's a new one.
Pretty great.
Written and directed by Neil Stevens, stars Aaron Bradshaw, Brian Ramium, and Eric Estas. A little over 11 minutes.
What a
link on YouTube.
What good actors. What good script.
It really was.
What good everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Child actors are usually just the most annoying thing on earth.
This kid was great.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, and the dad was great.
And everybody else was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the father reads a bedtime story to the son. How many stories have we seen that starts out with a kid in bed getting a story? And you know there's going to be a monster under the bed and
the
in the closet.
Aren't real. Yeah.
And that's not what happens.
No.
So the father
kind of wasn't unexpected.
Father reads a bedtime story to the son, and it's Poe's The Telltale Heart. Always a good story to read to a little kid before bedtime.
And the kid's expression. Well, you see the book is kind of blocking the kid, and he lowers the book after it's done, and just the wide-eyed horror on the kid's face.
That's a great thing to read to a kid.
Great thing to soothe the kid before bedtime.
And then the boy asks if his father ever saw monsters when he was little. And the dad says he used to see somebody he called the Skeleton Woman. And he describes her. That's probably worse than the Telltale Heart.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, then it's bedtime and the lights go off.
Yeah.
Of course, spooky things happen in the bedroom. The kid gets up and looks under the bed and all around until the Skeleton Woman appears.
Mm-hmm.
Dad comes in and shows him that nothing's really there.
Gives him his teddy bear.
Yeah. Dad then continues the story and explains why he's not afraid of the Skeleton Woman anymore. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. You have to watch for yourself.
This dad is not going to win any world's greatest prizes for storytelling. The kid, on the other hand, is really good at acting for his age. He looks terrified throughout until he doesn't anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very good short.
Mm-hmm. I see what's next.
A classic tale of love and corpses. Nekromantik, 1987, directed by Jörg Buttgereit, written by him and Franz Rodenkirchen, stars Bernd Daktari Lorenz, Beatrice Manowski, and Harold Lunt. It's German, subtitled, 1 hour and 11 minutes. Link in the show notes for an Amazon affiliate link.
And I've heard of European nasties. I'd never actually seen one before.
The video nasties?
Yeah, video nasties. I'd heard the expression and the genre, and yeah.
And here we are.
And this was the first I'd seen. Yeah, that was something.
Well, I think the majority of the shocker movies we've reviewed over the past 2 months probably qualify as the video nasties. Serbian film, grotesque, bunny game, those kind of things. They're all that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the why we've been watching them. Make a little series on these.
Yeah.
Did you like it?
Well, I kind of did.
It's kind of dumb. It's kind of cheap, but I kind of liked it too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do low budget, this is the way to do low budget.
It wasn't a complicated story. Yeah.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a real simple story. Well, a couple are driving down the road and they run into a train. We see their mutilated corpses as the credits roll. They're a mess.
And along comes the cleanup crew.
A crew of guys come and pick up the pieces and parts and stuff them into body bags. These body bags look like they're hefties.
Yeah, they did.
They work for Joe's street cleaning agency, and it's their job to clear the corpses off the road. One of the men, Rob, steals an eyeball and a heart and takes them home for his collection of body parts.
Takes a few mementos from his work.
Yeah.
He
has dozens of jars of souvenirs that he's brought home in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Rob then watches a TV show about people facing their fears to cure phobias. Rob then flashes back to a time when he watched someone graphically kill and skin a rabbit. And then we see his own dissections in medical school.
And the rabbit killing and skinning is real.
Yeah, that's real.
They can't use the no animals were harmed in the making of this film.
Not in this one,
disclaimer
no.
at the end of this one? No.
Well, I mean, it's, it's as humane as skin on a rabbit can get, but it's,
Yeah, they cut its throat. They cut its throat, didn't they?
Yeah. It's a little more graphic than you see on Life Below Zero.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we switch back and forth between the rabbit and the medical cadaver several times as each one is cut apart. We then change scenes to a tall guy picking apples in his backyard and his neighbor playing with a gun. Both of these actors are atrocious. The neighbor then shoots the gun and the apple guy is dead. He picks up the dead man, puts him in a wheelbarrow, and calls Joe's cleaning service for pickup. By the time he gets there, he's not much more than a skeleton. I think some time must have passed.
Some time passed, yeah.
Rob takes the body home with him. The whole thing.
Yeah.
His wife Betty helps him unwrap the body. She likes that body. He then saws off a metal rod and uses it to construct a penis for it. Made of iron.
And they proceed to
And
have
she promptly
sex.
hops on top of it and makes passionate, sticky, slimy sex with it.
And
No, wait, I spoke too soon. Rob gets involved and then they have a three-way.
It's a three-way. Yes. And it's graphic. And it's
It
gross.
Sure is.
Wow.
Later, Betty lays with the corpse and reads to it from a romance novel. They're kind of bonding now.
She's kind of bonded and developed feelings for her little guy, her new little friend.
Meanwhile, back at Joe's, they decide Rob isn't working out and they fire him. Betty is now mad as their current corpse isn't going to last forever. She leaves Rob and takes her friend with her, her new friend. Rob then buys a cat. He feeds the cat human organs and then kills it. He then cuts the cat open and rubs its guts all over himself.
Yeah, the poor guy from that point on, he's just dealing with the loss of his girl and loss of his job and loss of purpose, and kind of feel sorry for him.
Rob then goes out to a slasher movie and watches in boredom as the girl on screen is raped and murdered on screen.
Yeah, it's just not the same as the real thing.
He leaves in the middle since it disturbs him so much.
Well, I don't think it really
You're right,
disturbed
he's
him. I think
bored.
he was bored.
Yeah.
It wasn't the
Not as
same
good
as
as
the
the real
hands-on
thing.
with his girl, and yeah.
Yeah. He goes home, takes a pill, and dreams of a corpse playing catch with a severed head. Not being able to handle it anymore, Rob goes out and picks up a hooker. They drive to the cemetery and have sex on a tombstone in the fog. He can't do it, and she laughs at him. He then kills her. Aha, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
Once she's dead, he's able to finish, and he goes to sleep next to her body until the caretaker finds him the next morning. The caretaker gets half his head removed with a shovel. Rob goes home, picks up a knife, and then stabs himself. It's the best sex he's ever had.
While masturbating.
As he
he ejaculates violently as he plunges the knife into his stomach. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, it's graphic in gore and sex.
As he bleeds out, we see the rabbit scene from the beginning, running in reverse as the skin and blood go back into the rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
Time passes.
His final fantasy.
And we get a close-up of Rob's grave. Betty comes by with a shovel. Hey, she's interested in him again.
That's where it ends, with her starting to dig.
Well, that was something. IMDb
Classic of horror.
states that the director said in an interview that he never intended to be a director, and Nekromantik was just a film to rebel against the German film rating system, trying to shock as many people as possible. You think he shocked some people with this one?
Probably.
In the 80s?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, probably.
And you can see that here as it goes from bad to worse in the shock department,
Mm-hmm.
with a little bit of a story going on between the shocker scenes. There's even mention in one of the TV shows that Rob watches about video nasties, of which this film is certainly included.
How'd you like the soundtrack, too? That romantic piano music.
Getting to that.
Pounding, violent, pounding romantic music.
There are multiple shots of people peeing that I noticed.
Oh, yeah, that was a common theme.
No
Going through,
genitals, just streams of water going in the toilet or in the
Mhm.
field. Somebody out there thought that was very entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
Just splashing on the ground.
Folks are into that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of get the corpse sex, but just watching people pee, I don't get that one.
Different strokes for different folks.
Okay.
Hmm.
The film quality and the shooting style constantly reminded me of 1980s European music videos.
Mm.
And it wouldn't have
Mhm.
surprised me at any time for the street cleaners to have broken out in a song and dance number, but unfortunately that never happened. Lack of singing aside, the music in the film is quite good, with long shots of necrophilia and running through the countryside, intertwined with some excellent music. I like the music. You're kind of making fun of it.
It was kind of, yeah,
Over the top.
over the top.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
There are long segments where Rob is alone with no dialogue, and obviously, since dialogue is at a minimum, the music is very noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
The film is kind of hard to classify. It had good gore, and it was shocking. There was, in fact, a story, but most of it was just an excuse to show sexy dead things. Overall, I'm going to go with a 7 out of 10 on this one.
Yeah, I think I probably would too.
Yeah. There is a Nekromantik 2
Yeah,
that I'll bet wasn't this good. I haven't seen it, but I'll bet it wasn't as good.
I bet it wasn't.
One way to find
I
out.
bet they're trying too hard on the second one.
Very likely.
Yeah, but we should try it and see. Yeah.
Well, did we watch a French film?
Yes.
Livid, 2011. French and subtitled.
Mm-hmm.
Directed by Alexandre Bastille, Julien Maury. Written by Julien Maury and the same two people. Stars Chloe Calude. I'm mangled the French here.
You're going to mangle the French
Chloe
names.
Calude, Felix Moati, and Jeremy Capone.
Yeah.
How would you say that last name? Calou? Calode?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't do French.
Yeah, I don't know.
1 hour, 32 minutes, subtitled in French. Okay. Did you like it?
It was okay.
Yeah, it's all right. Yeah.
Maybe a little less than okay.
It wasn't super over the top, but there was nothing wrong with it either.
Yeah.
Little better than meh, but we've seen it all before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it felt.
Actually, some of the parts of this we saw not too long ago.
Yeah. Yeah, a movie called Don't Breathe.
Yeah.
Very, some reminiscence of it. Yeah.
A lot reminiscent of it.
Well, it diverged.
Yeah, eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we zoom in on Lucy, a young woman whose eyes are 2 different colors, which is irrelevant to the plot.
But it's important at the end. Because that wasn't her anymore. And it was Lucy. The 2 eye colors.
Yeah?
Yeah.
They weren't the same. The what?
The eye colors were different.
They were?
Yeah, at the
I
end.
missed that.
Yeah, at the end. That's how you knew it was her.
Oh. Okay, I learned something tonight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why they did that.
Okay, so her eyes are 2 different colors and she's waiting at a bus stop. The bus stop is plastered with missing persons posters. Mrs. Wilson comes and picks her up. Lucy is told that having 2 differently colored eyes means she has 2 different souls, but she's doubtful. Lucy and Mrs. Wilson are in-home nurses, and they stop to give a sad old man a shot. Then they stop to change an old woman's diaper. On the third stop, Mrs. Wilson makes Lucy wait in the car. "You aren't ready for this patient," Mrs. Wilson says. Well,
No,
it wouldn't be
no,
a
she's
horror
not.
movie if anybody followed instructions. Lucy doesn't wait and wanders through the yard up to the huge old house. We see that there's a huge iron gate and metal shutters over the windows, which couldn't come into play later, could they?
No, not at all.
No.
It's a huge, beautiful wreck of a house.
She goes in the house, and it's a huge old place that has seen much, much better days. Inside, Lucy finds an old woman named Mrs. Jessel, who is hooked up to an oxygen mask. She used to be a famous dance instructor. The old woman gets a regular transfusion of new blood. She's very rich, and everyone says there's a treasure in the house somewhere. Then Lucy's first day is over. There's a strange scene where Mrs. Wilson is following a young girl on a bicycle too closely, and then we flash away to something else.
And I immediately knew that's where the blood's coming from.
And you were right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's collecting it from people.
Trying to be mysterious, but a little too obvious there.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Lucy meets up with her boyfriend, William, who asks all about her day. She tells him about the big old house and the story about the treasure, and William immediately wants to break in and look for that treasure.
Mm-hmm.
He just got out of jail, but Lucy's father is having financial trouble, so he asks her to at least consider it. We then shift to Mrs. Wilson, who's draining the blood of a dead girl in her bathtub. And this is where the transfusions come from.
Mm-hmm.
Lucy's father is dating again, and Lucy thinks of her mother, who hung herself in the bathroom 8 months ago. Lucy calls William and says, "Okay, let's do it."
Let's do it.
Lucy, William, and their friend Ben go that very night, which just happens to be Halloween. Lucy sees a blue flame coming out of the ground, and she touches it with her hand. They climb the fence but can't get the front door open. They finally find a basement window without bars on it, and they all go inside and start searching for a safe. They don't find anything on the first floor, so they head upstairs. There's a locked door, but Lucy remembers seeing a key around Mrs. Jessel's neck. They go up to the third floor. Lucy takes the key and they head back downstairs. The key doesn't work, so they force the door. Inside, they find the mummified corpse of Mrs. Jessel's daughter. Okay, and at this point we have to digress and go back 6 months of time of real time, and we watched a 2015 movie called Don't Breathe, probably around episode 28 or 30 or thereabouts, so 6 months ago. And this is about 3 young people who break into an old blind man's house to steal his treasure because he's blind and disabled and helpless.
And then they find something.
And they
that
find
they
things that
don't
they're not.
expect.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's exactly, if you outline the 2 movies, this actually Don't Breathe came after this, which we liked that movie. We thought it was very original.
Wasn't.
They copied half the movie from this, step by step.
Oh, it sure seems that way.
Yeah, except for the dead girl inside,
Mm-hmm.
and the blind man had a prisoner in the basement. Step for step, the same at this point.
But then it starts diverging.
Now it starts diverging.
Very much so. Yeah.
Well, they find a keyhole, insert the key, and the dead girl starts rotating like a ballerina on a music box.
Like she's a marionette or
Yeah.
clockwork mechanism or something.
William freaks out and punches the dead girl, and then they hear loud footsteps upstairs. They've woken something up. They run back the way they came in, but now the entrance has bars on the window that didn't before. Lucy explains that Mrs. Jessel's bedroom doesn't have any bars. They run back upstairs, and there's only a puddle of blood where Mrs. Jessel used to lay.
Uh-oh. She's awake.
Ben is separated from the others and finds himself trapped inside some weird kind of laboratory with dead things in bottles. 3 dead ballerinas come out of nowhere and kill him. That was just out of the blue.
Kinda, yeah.
Well, William tries to break out. Lucy meets Mrs. Jessel, who gives her a flashback. Jessel's daughter, Anna, killed and partially ate one of the other dance students. She runs outside and collapses in the sunlight, and an invisible force picks her up and carries her back inside. She seems to lose all power in the daytime. You know any other supernatural creatures that lose power in the daytime?
Vampires.
Yeah, but that's not this.
Vampires.
That's
well,
not
not quite.
this.
Not quite. Sorta, kinda.
Yeah, it sort of was going that way, but it
vampire-ish.
didn't.
Vampire-ish.
Yeah, but it
There's
wasn't.
blood involved.
It's a weird movie.
It's weird, yeah. There's blood and black magic, and it's vampire-ish and warlockish and witchish. And, yeah.
And Invisible Man carrying her back in-ish. And why was she drinking? Yeah, there's a lot to this.
Yeah.
William finds Ben wearing a hood, and he won't answer William when he talks to him. When William pulls Ben's mask off, he sees that Ben isn't exactly alive. They fight, and William manages to beat Ben. Then Mrs. Jessel enters the room, and she finishes the job with William. Lucy winds up back in the room with a dead ballerina girl, who now has a bloody nose. Another flashback. Mrs. Jessel forces Anna to dance until she literally breaks her in half. The girl comes to life and attacks Lucy, and they fight. Lucy wins this round, but then Mrs. Wilson comes in and sucker punches Lucy. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, there is.
Lucy wakes up in the laboratory. She was one of Jessel's students, or Mrs. Wilson was one of Jessel's students, and she helped assemble the new and improved Anna with flesh and clockworks. Jessel and Wilson tie her down to the table and implant some kind of worm in Lucy's and Anna's necks, and then both worms turn into moths and fly away. Jessel now calls Lucy Anna
Dark magic.
And commands her to dance.
Dark magic and science.
Anna now inhabits Lucy's body. Lucy/Anna stabs Wilson with scissors and then does the same with Jessel. Lucy then cuts herself and pours blood into Anna's mouth. The two of them then inspect the carnage. Of course, Jessel gets up and attacks them again, never stays dead, but the two then team up to throw her off the balcony and then literally tear her apart.
Yeah, she's dead that time.
Yeah. Then they both go outside and find that blue flame is out there again. The next morning, the two of them walk to the oceanside cliffs and Anna jumps off. Rather than fall to her death, she floats away on the wind. The end.
And that's why the eye collar played, because they had switched bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So who floated away then? Lucy?
Yes.
Or Anna?
Lucy. It was actually Lucy and Anna's body.
Okay, what did the blue flame have to do with it?
Magic. Fairy magic.
Why was the little girl Anna
Symbolic.
chewing on the dead ballerina students?
Because she could.
Where did the three dead ghosts?
Hungry.
Where did the three dead ballerina ghosts come from? Why did any of this happen? You don't know any of these questions, do you?
Explained. We don't know. No.
Well, the trailer alone reminded me of the film Don't Breathe from 2016, where a group of young people go and attempt to rob a blind man who has secrets of his own. We thought that film was original when we saw it, but a lot of that plot came straight from this film. This one has supernatural underpinnings, but otherwise the main plot points are very nearly identical for the first two-thirds of the film. Not much is explained here. It all looks good and has a high creep factor, but I'm a little confused as to what happened and why. Obviously.
Because these things happen.
But it was all entertaining to watch.
Because science and black magic.
Yeah. There's a lot that didn't make sense in this one. But it looked good. It was fun to watch.
Yeah.
I don't regret watching it.
It was entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
7 out of 10 on this one.
Me too. Yeah.
Okay. So
we didn't hate any of these, but we didn't really love any of them.
The Mad Ghoul was pretty lame. I wasn't blown away with Paranoiac. I liked Nekromantik, and I liked Livid. And the short was good too, The Monster.
I think I kind of might give maybe a 7 to all of these. Maybe a 6 on the Mad Ghoul.
I'd go seriously 5 on the Mad Ghoul. It was a step above boring. Half a step.
Half a step?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. Well, as long as it's half a step.
Okay, speaking of a half a step beyond boring, we have next week's films.
Which are?
I don't know. I haven't seen them yet.
Huh.
We have The Man-Made Monster from 1941, one of Lon Chaney's first movies.
That was one I had never even heard of before.
Yeah. It becomes electrical or radioactive or something. The Old Dark House from 1963.
Which is a remake of the other Old Dark House.
30-something Old Dark House that we saw way back when. Yeah, This is in color. It's a Hammer film this time. The Butcher from 2020. Ooh.
We're seeing movies in the future.
We're seeing movies that aren't quite out there yet. And Salo, or 120 Days of Sodom, from 1975. And I have not seen any of these before, other than sort of the original Dark House.
Right.
So, I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
And here's to a second year of the Horror Guys.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yay.
See you next week. I'm Brian.
I'm Kevin.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
And we didn't even tell people to go to horrorguys.com. Or to check out our Twitter feed at Horror Bulletin.
Or call the phone number.
937-453-1575.
But we forgot to put those in, so there's no way that people will know about those.
They know these things.
Yeah.